This PC wasn't supposed to have a 3070, nor was it supposed to be on an A520MK motherboard, but when inspiration comes knocking, you have to be accommodating. Let's get into today's build and I will explain as we go along. We start off though by installing this modest 256GB M.2 SSD that will be used as a boot drive. And sitting pretty atop of the aforementioned A520 is a Ryzen 7 3700X 8-core and 16-thread processor that I originally wanted to pair with a B550, but that would blow today's budget quite badly, especially since I have ditched the intended RTX 2060 6GB for the 3070 founders that is lurking in the left hand corner of the screen. To feel better about itself, I gave the motherboard VRM heatsinks that, while not massive, are glued on with thermal glue and they would easily increase the heat dissipating area tenfold, so I am sure that there are no compromises when it comes to longevity. A-series boards are locked down for overclocking anyway, so there really isn't any danger of overloading the VRMs. Maybe if you double the core count and went with a 3950X there might be issues, but even then I doubt it since even PBO is disabled. Really is only for my own peace of mind, as a few heatsinks never really hurt anyone. And if you like this type of PC building content, I would sincerely appreciate it if you would like the video and consider subscribing. Not having access to PCIe 4.0 makes literally no difference for the GPU, and the SSD is PCIe 3.0 only anyways. I promise there is a reason I'm trying to spare the thermal paste. I'm afraid that this is third time lucky and my MX5 has gone bad. It doesn't really affect the performance in any way thankfully, but the silicone oil separated from paste means you can't rely on pressure from the cooler alone to do the spreading. I knew this was a possibility with the MX5 being notorious for this issue leading to its discontinuation. I have emailed Arctic and asked for what can only be termed as warranty, as 24 British pounds isn't exactly inexpensive and I only used this particular tub once or twice. For the cooler I opted for a Box Wraith. It's not a glamorous choice by any means, but without access to PBO or manual overclocking, this 7nm processor is actually a very tame beast at just 65 watts. With the cooler being dimensioned for 105 watts because it's shipped with the 2700X. Oh yeah, and the RAM, forgot about that. This is taken care of by a 16GB 2x8 Ballistics 3200 Mbps RGB. And good news here, these are very overclocking friendly. Before we can go any further, I need to install a PSU in this Corsair case, and as usual I didn't skimp on it, going for the recommended 650 watts using this nice unit from Corsair. Even though this PC will never be able to consume more than 450 watts, no matter how much you goad it into using more. Next, all the components that we put together separately on the bench need to come inside the case, and after it's all screwed in place, the star of today's show, the GPU, needs to go in. I really love the look of the 30 and 40 series Founders Edition cards. I just wish that on a 70 card class and below they would skip the 12V high power connector, as it's completely useless, only taking in one 8-pin PCIe. I sort of understand it when you have 2, 3 or even 4 8-pin PCIe connectors being adapted to one 12V high power one, but the one-to-one with dummy wires is just a bit stupid. Going around back, I will install two hard drives, a 500GB and a 320GB. These are usually freebies, and while I'm certain the 500GB is all good, I can't really remember where I got the 320GB from. I've been trying to remember, but I just can't place it. In the beginning it seems as it was working okay and I had no qualms giving it away. It's only later that it started to stop and start while copying files to it, so sadly I had to chuck it in the bin, as it's simply not worth the aggravation. Next, I need to install an RGB connector for the front 3 fans. This is a task usually taken care of by the motherboard or the included case controller, but here neither is present, so this remote control 12V RGB controller will have to do. The only downside I can think of is that we won't be able to sync up the RAM, cooler and fans automatically, but somehow I don't think this can even be classed as a first world problem. On a slightly more serious note, unfortunately, and as a byproduct of building PCs at 2 AM, I managed to damage the USB 3 internal header. Most likely while I was trying to cable manage the GPU, leading to one of the USB ports to act erratically. Now, this really isn't a big deal, certainly nothing a dumb USB plug couldn't solve, but due to the relative shortage of USB 3 headers on this motherboard, I decided to turn this slight snafu into an opportunity. I quickly checked Jeff's shop and got a USB 3 to USB 2 converter so I can run the top USBs from the internal headers, and also bought a non-sucky Wi-Fi adapter that can actually use USB 3 speeds, and I will install that inside the case. Long length of wire plus the massive antennae will negate any disadvantage of being inside the case, and just like this is a Wi-Fi enabled machine. I tested it in a few positions with and without the glass installed, and in the end I ended up positioning right in front of the bottom intake fan, as that seemed to give me the best possible Wi-Fi signal. Might even plug in a Bluetooth 5.0 controller if I can find it. And a quick test to make sure it all starts up and works properly, and then we can have a look at the pictures before moving on to the benchmarks. Starting off as per usual with Heaven, I have decided to go for 1440p today, or 2K. That usually translates to 2560 by 1440, but because the monitor I'm using is actually Quad HD or 3440 by 1440, it got a bit funky at times with the resolution and active signal, leading me to opt again to use Shadowplay instead of my capture card, because 1, it's easier, and 2, I feel it's a valid use case for a GPU like this one. You can add 2 to 5 extra FPS on everything to account for the encoding task. But even without that, at over 170 FPS on average in Heaven, this is an exceptionally good start, showing off the card's great raster performance. In Superposition, we get more of the same with raster performance that doesn't leave much to be desired. And although Superposition is a much newer benchmark that is a lot harder to run, we still get over 100 FPS comfortably at 2K with everything turned all the way up. Rocket League is the first esports title we'll be looking at today, and it's also a bit of an edge case with a peculiar relationship with Ryzen processors depending on its mood and if the latest update was borked or not. This time it posts 264 FPS on average in the opening match, which at 1440p is a good result. Fortnite still doesn't seem to support the newest Lumen and Nanite technologies on all the maps, forcing me to join the Battle Royale. 60 FPS lock annoys me the most, as changing to unlimited defaults to ambient occlusion instead of lumen, so it can't really be used as a proper benchmark. This really is more for answering the "can you run it" question, and the answer is yes, very well indeed. It's stuck very close to the 60 FPS frame limit, with only occasional drops to the mid-50s that you would not notice unless looking at the frame counter. I know I wouldn't. The issue is that 60 FPS in this title simply isn't a competitive experience. If I was forced to actually play it for some reason, I would definitely forgo the nice lighting and uncap the frame rate. Horizon Zero Dawn is the first AAA title we'll be looking at today, and because by this point it's not exactly brand new, I would be expecting it to run very well. And it does, with 110 FPS on average in the benchmark, meaning the average will be considerably higher during normal gameplay. The cool thing about this title is that Sony did a nice thing and added FSR and DLSS way after launch, which is a very rare thing. And here I am using DLSS set to the highest quality settings as I normally do. I know I say this in every video, but come on, hurry up and release Forbidden West for PC already. The first RTX enhanced title we'll be looking at today is Control, and at 2K with everything turned all the way up plus DLSS, I can say deja vu? Why is that? Well, because it runs exactly like my old 2080 Ti, a card that launched at 1200 British pounds. I know that was a while ago now, but I can call that progress. 48 FPS on average with smooth frame pacing is a great way to experience this awesome looking game. Sure, you can turn down the settings or the resolution or even forgo RTX entirely for high refresh rates, but in this title half the magic comes from the amazing visuals while the other half from the trippy story. Why would you have one without the other? Days Gone is the polar opposite of Control. No fancy tech at all, just good old-fashioned rasterization and a mediocre but passable storyline. I don't usually go for the zombie genre, but I stuck it out with this one and it went from intriguing to cheesy real quick. But getting back to the topic at hand, and how does the 3070 handle this title? Very well, I might say, with 94 FPS on average in the opening motorcycle chase scene using the very high preset, which is known to take a disproportionate toll on the hardware. If anything, the 3700X is a standout here, as Days Gone is a CPU demanding game and the 8-core Ryzen 7 does very well. Speaking of CPU demanding games, Far Cry 6. 72 FPS on average at 2K Ultra with FSR set to the highest quality isn't bad. Well, not until you realize that the GPU is almost spinning its wheels. I have ranted at length before about the Dunia engine and Ubisoft specific engines generally for being unreasonably CPU intensive, but at least I gotta hand it to them, they solved the bouncing of the CPU stutters. This is no way a criticism of the excellent 3700X, it's purely a software not a hardware issue. I might even consider going 4K in this title because why not? It's not gonna make any difference to the frame rate, it's just gonna utilize the GPU better and increase the fidelity if you've got the monitor for it. Assassin's Creed these days isn't that bad anymore, certainly a great deal better optimized than its Ubisoft stablemate. With 84 FPS on average and decent frame times consistency, the 3070 and 3700X make for a great pairing here without relying on any upscaling techniques as in the case of Far Cry. As this title is heavily skewed towards exploration, having north of 60 FPS is really just a nice to have, with the story and visuals driving most of the experience, not necessarily the combat. While the fluidity boost is welcome, it's the next Assassin's Creed that launches in March that has piqued my curiosity. Can't wait to play that after all the promises made by the developers that they are going back to the series' roots. Cyberpunk at 2K Ultra falls just 1 FPS shy of 60 when not using Shadowplay, which is quite an achievement for Ultra RT. I previously proclaimed that the GTX 970 is the minimum GPU you need to play this game. I think I need to add to that statement by saying that the 3070 is the minimum GPU you need to truly experience this game. The 3060 and 3060 Ti were both found a bit lacking this title at 1080p, with the 3070 considerably elevating the game in experience and also doubling the resolution. I'm very much looking forward to the new RT overdrive feature when it finally launches, as it's really been hyped up by Nvidia when they launched the 40 series. The Witcher 3's next-gen update is unfortunately at present a mess. In one of my previous videos, I discussed the state of the game after hotfix 1, which was dangerously broken, especially if you wanted to use 40 series frame generation, and even after subsequent patches, it hasn't really improved that much. I was forced to set the DLSS to balance with the resolution set to 2K in order to have a playable experience. Sure, it still looks good, but for a 7-year-old title, it has no excuse to be running this poorly, even with all the new enhancements. Case in point, if you turn off RT, the CPU usage in DX12 mode is ridiculous. I think it probably has something to do with draw call API conversion, as this is not a native DirectX 12 game, and that is saying nothing of all the crashes and general weirdness I've experienced. It doesn't look good for CD Projekt Red's Redemption arc. I hope they get this title in shape ASAP. Realistically, aided by DLSS, a PC with a 3070 in it should be able to run this title at 2K resolution with over 60 FPS. And that's about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and see you in the next one.